time to cut open the top of the toy chest. We've got it set up here, the saw blade set, the fence set, and the toy chest has been stained, it's been polyurethaned. Running this across the tabletop of my saw table is going to cause some scratches, but that's not a big deal. I'll do some light sanding, reapply polyurethane, and we'll be fine. So let's get started. It's really important that the box stays square. You don't want it wandering around as you're running it through the saw blade. This next part I'm going to have to put a stand on the other side, because as I push it through, the length of the box is going to want to go off the table, and then it becomes difficult to balance. Give me a minute. Because my workshop is so small, I have my table saw on a movable stand. Now, that's not ideal. You'd really like your table saw set flat on the floor, and you'd like to be able to have an outfeed table attached to it so that as you push your stock through, there's something that it can rest on and it doesn't tilt after it goes off the table. I have a portable stand here. It's okay, and it's what I use, but it's not an ideal situation. So I've turned my table saw now catty corner in my workshop, and I'm going to run the box through along the long end. You may have noticed while I was doing that, I wasn't looking at this side, I wasn't looking at the blade, I was looking at the fence, trying to keep the box tight up against the fence, because the fence is parallel to the blade, and that gives me the straightest possible cut. I'll switch things around and make the next one. For this final cut, you can see that I've attached two clamps, and I have these spacers. These spacers are 1/8 of an inch wide, and that 1/8 of an inch corresponds to the thickness of my saw blade, and that's called the kerf of the saw blade. The saw blade is 1/8 of an inch wide, and as I was pushing the box through on the first three cuts, the rest of the box was providing structure, and there was no splintering or tear out of the wood. Now, however, as I push this last piece through, excuse me, there's no support. The box will be fully open when I'm complete with this, and I still need some support to prevent tear out or ripping of the wood. And that's what these spacers are going to do. And that's it. The box top is open. I'll set everything up and we'll take a look. Okay, so you can see that there are some light scratches in the top, and I'll simply lightly sand this and reapply polyurethane, and that'll take care of it. I'm going to go ahead and take off the clamps. And the block of wood was just to provide a little bit of protection to the stain. I didn't want to dimple. Even though it's a hard wood, I don't want to take the chance. As we take this off, those spacers are going to simply fall out. And there's the toy chest. If you would look real close when I cut the box open, you may have seen some smoke drifting in the air. And that's the result of the saw blade burning. Whenever I stopped or didn't have it quite set right, the saw blade would burn, and that's the result. That's the burning of the saw blade. It's not ideal. I should have a somewhat sharper blade, and I should have just done one push through instead of pausing periodically, and this is the result of that. But I'll sand it off and we'll continue on, and it won't be that big of a deal. I just wanted to let you know, if you had seen the smoke, what was going on. Now that I have the box open, it's time to think about getting the trim on the bottom. And I cut this sample piece here. I want to cut a rabbet in the top. This will be what the face of the trim, so this is the back. And when I attach it to the bottom of the box, it will let in just a little bit and stand slightly proud on the outside. If you've been watching my videos, you may have noticed that I wore my wedding band and a watch while I was working around this machinery. Now, I've worked around machinery most of my life, and I always made it a habit to remove watch and rings when I was working. And I got away from that habit. I got a little lazy and forgot about it. And a friend of mine, Chuck, sent me what I assumed to be a gruesome video. I didn't actually watch it, Chuck. I can't bring myself to do that. But I'm going to take your word for it that it was gruesome, and took heed of your advice, and subsequently I think it was Caroline reminded me of the same thing, that you shouldn't wear watches or jewelry while working around machinery. So I've removed it. What I'm working on now is the trim for the box, and for the trim, as I demonstrated in the last video, I want to cut a rabbet. Here's the trim piece, that's the face of it, and instead of using a stacked dado head, I'm just going to take a 3/8 inch cut with the fence 3/8 inches away from the saw blade, and the combination of those two should give me the rabbet that I want. And there's the rabbet. The box will be let down into the rabbet. So I need handles for the children to be able to lift the lid on the toy box up. I'll have a piano hinge on the back and soft close hinges as well. And didn't want to have anything sticking out that could bump little heads, or that jumping off the top of the toy box, they could injure themselves. So I wanted to recess the handles into the lid. So what I came up with was, I'm going to use this cove bit, and I wanted to make sure that it was symmetrical on both sides. So I put these stop blocks on the lid, and I'll just run my router between the stop blocks, and if I've done the measurements right, everything should be centered. We're quickly coming up on the end of this project. I've got the trim in. The entire toy chest is wrapped with very simple trim, but it sets it off nicely, and it lifts the box itself up off the floor. I've put adjustable feet on the bottom, and now I'm finishing off the inside. And I had asked Lisa if I should stain the inside, and she said no, keep it natural. And as I thought about it, she's right, it should be natural. This should be very light and warm for children to reach in for their toys. It shouldn't be a dark and foreboding place, but a bright and happy place. That's what a toy chest is supposed to be. And I suppose if it was a blanket chest or a hope chest, the same thing would apply. I just kind of like the way it's dark on the outside and bright and inviting on the inside. Kind of like a home.